Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting Australian Indian Radio's daily Facebook Live update. And looking outside is just such a wonderful day out there. Well, still a little bit brisk in the morning, as we know that the temperatures not as cold likely, but it's been, or maybe we are all just getting used to that. So let's take a very quick look at the weather for rest of today. Maximum is going to be 22 degrees today. It's going to be sunny as you look out there. Chance of rain is 0. And Brisbane area winds west to southwesterly 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. Fire danger still remains very, very high, as we know. It is very, very dry, so it will be. Sun protection is recommended from now till about 1:30 p.m. with the UV index remaining at about 4. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's been a lot that's been happening out there in the community, even though it will be hard to believe because we are under the COVID-19 conditions. I've just come out of the meeting of all the multicultural communities, and the news that's been coming out from each and every community, the reports that they have all submitted today, was that, mostly they have got things under control. What's happening is virtually, that's it. Most of the events are taking place in the virtual space, but many of the communities have reported that people are now coming out with small gatherings taking place. Some religious activities have begun as well with the congregation of people, but again with the strict measures. But sometimes it is hard to police those measures as we have seen in some instances. But again, the onus is then it's on us to make sure that we remain cool and calm under all those conditions. The confirmed cases, so far in Queensland, 1,071 with the recovery of 1,058, that recorded deaths at 6. In Australia, the numbers are whopping 10,495, 7,928 recoveries with 111 deaths. And that number has been rising as well. We'd like to say that that's no more and that, the numbers is decreasing, but unfortunately that is not the case. The case is that the numbers are increasing and even coming so far in, by now, we would have thought that, the situation would have been under better control than what it is. But what it is what it is, and we really, really need to deal with that. Worldwide, 13.4 million reported cases and recovery at 7.4 million and 580 plus K deaths that have been recorded in the world. So that is the news out there. Well, now moving on with the show, when we look at the aviation and when you look at travel and getting around, none other than just myself. If you look at me, around this time of the year, by this time I would have traveled halfway around the world. I have visited so many countries and attended so many international conferences, but that is not happening this year. Why? Because of this pandemic. And of course, one of the flights that took place yesterday was that symbolic final flight of Qantas 747, as we know, the jumbo jets, as we used to call it. The great sensation when it first came out, and everyone were raving about that. But unfortunately, the Qantas 747 took its last flight out yesterday. I don't know how I missed that. They did a good, wonderful loop until it goes into retirement. So let's look at a report here on that last flight that was yesterday. Some lucky people did get on board. And there was a gentleman there who had got on board the first flight, and now he said a perfect bookmark for him would be on this last and the final flight of the Jumbo 747.
Qantas's last 747 has taken to the skies above Brisbane for the final time. For the best part of half a century, the Boeing Jumbo jet was a ticket to anywhere in the world, transforming the aviation industry.
A fitting farewell for the Queen of the Skies, preparing to take off from Brisbane Airport for the last time.
It's a bittersweet moment, but I'm trying to focus on how much fun this flight's going to be.
A jumbo jet that connected the world.
And we've ordered good weather today, so our prayers were answered.
Qantas 747, line up runway 19 left.
Plane spotters weren't going to miss the moment.
They're an iconic aircraft, the shape. Just everyone knows what a jumbo is.
The 1.5-hour Joy flight booked out. Flying above Brisbane, the Gold and Sunshine Coasts.
Today I have the opportunity to collect the other bookends. I will have travelled on the first and the last.
Landing in Brisbane in 1971, she was the first twin-aisle aeroplane allowing passengers to stand up and walk around.
It's going to be a sad day for everybody who operates on it, including myself.
This was the 57th and last Boeing 747 delivered to Qantas in 2003. Next Wednesday, she'll leave Australia for good, retiring in the Mojave Desert. 6 months earlier than expected in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. But not before 13-year-old Eli Seymour got to fly, invited to take a spare seat at the last minute when a passenger didn't show up.
It was a great flight, yeah. It's one truly to remember.
One we won't forget. Isabel Mullen, 7 News.
And there you are, as end of an era, as they say. So, this is the sign of times to come and things. So the Jumbo 747, I think they were quite a safe flight as well. And that upper deck there was always a joy to be up there, a beautiful, beautiful flight. But anyway, goodbye to Jumbo 747. Well, let's move on with the news and let's look at what's happening right here in Queensland. As we know, Queensland has been very focused on jobs. So first we'll look at the scenes outside the Parliament House with the press conferences and news being made. Then we'll go inside the Parliament House and look at some of the proceedings and see how things are progressing there. So right now, in front of the Parliament House with the apprentices and jobs, making that announcement is our Premier.
Today we're announcing $90 million towards skills and training. We know that young people were hit particularly hard during COVID. So these packages are aimed very much at getting young people back into work and training. We've done a $70 million extension to Back to Work. We've now enabled that to increase for a $20,000 to employers that put on an apprentice or a trainee. We've also have $10 million for Skilling Queenslanders for Work.
Skilling Queenslanders for Work means 500 more young Queenslanders will get an opportunity of a training pathway into a rewarding job. This program has created over 30,000 jobs in Queensland.
And then of course we've got $10 million for our Reef Assist program. We expect 200 people will be employed. It's particularly aimed at young people in the hospitality industry that have lost their jobs due to COVID and tourism. And we want to get them back into meaningful work to help protect our iconic Great Barrier Reef.
To getting people back into meaningful work. And very well said there, Premier. So now let's hear from some of the trainees and see what they had to say about this program.
So I actually ended up unemployed during COVID, and then I sort of was looking for a career change at the same time. I started looking at courses and I was lucky enough to find a paid one, which was awesome for the time. So I want to figure out what trade I want to do, get a bit of hands-on experience in all of them. John, our teacher, he's great and he's really supportive of females in the industry too. He's always like, get in there. Don't let the boys take over, make sure you girls get in there too, you can do it. So that's been really good. We've got 2 other girls in the course. So
My last role I was deemed as not essential staff and I was unemployed on the dole
and this opportunity came up for me, which provided me with more skills to be able to become more employable. The training is very in-depth. It covers a wide range of things from construction, using tools, managing power tools. It goes through a lot of theory with the environmental standards, safe work methods statements, and on-the-job environmental standards and procedures.
I feel really lucky. Having previously lost work due to coronavirus, I feel very lucky to be able to be in the position I'm in right now. Having that Cert 1 just gives you an edge over, say, other people that might be applying for the same type of work. We're also given the ability to do certificates on top of that as well, which helps us in the long run as well getting work in the future.
So there you are, getting Queenslanders back to work, and a great initiative there, and good to see the apprentices and the tradespeople coming out there as well, because as we know, we are all always focused quite heavily on many of the white-collar, blue-collar jobs, but the trade and that tradies section is, of course, a great way to boost the economy. And a lot of our people these days are focusing on those trade courses as well, because we do need all the tradies, because each and every society needs all these classes of people. You need to have the rulers, you need the workers, you need the administrators, you need people to protect your borders. So these are the different classes that they come in, and it is by no way called discrimination. That is another topic for another day. But right now, as I promised, that we've seen the scenes outside the Parliament House, what's happening out there, but where the policies are being made. How and what's the scene there. So let's get into the Parliament House.
I think the actions of the Minister putting forward new schools in Queensland is perfectly acceptable, Mr Speaker. I think the actions of this Minister backing teachers is perfectly acceptable, Mr Speaker. I think delivering record budget in education
Members to my left.
is perfectly acceptable, Mr Speaker. And what we've seen today, Mr Speaker, is how the Leader of the Opposition can't even ask a basic question under the standing orders, Mr Speaker. A failure of leadership. A failure of leadership to ask a basic fundamental question in the House of Democracy, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I have absolute faith in the Minister for Education. The Minister for Education has made a solid explanation to this House, Mr Speaker, and
Member
those
for
on the other
Kawana.
side seek to construe it.
Member
Mr.
for
Speaker.
Coomera.
They look at twisting it, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, let me say very clearly, the people of this state will have their say at the next election about who they support and who they don't support. On this side of the House, Mr Speaker, we are focused on uniting and recovery on
Order.
the
Members to my left.
pandemic. Mr Speaker, we have not heard
Member
an
for Coomera will
alternative
cease his
plan
interjections.
from those opposite. I'm sorry, they had one plan, and that was to open the borders, Mr Speaker, and put everybody at risk, Mr Speaker. On this side, Mr Speaker, we will stand with the people of Queensland. We will put their health first, Mr Speaker. Those opposite, you can't trust the LNP, Mr Speaker. They would put everything at risk. They would put every single Queenslander at risk, Mr Speaker, and they should hang their heads in shame. It's any wonder the backbencher talking about the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Speaker. It's any wonder. And it's any wonder that anyone on that side of the House would go to the member for Kawana for any ounce of strategy, Mr Speaker. Failure on every single account. The worst Attorney-General that ever existed in this state. And the member for Kawana is the Leader of the Opposition's brain trust. Heaven help us, Mr Speaker. The strategy was to
Member
open
for
the
Everton
borders.
will cease his interjections.
Where would Queensland have been, Mr Speaker? 64 times they wanted the borders open. 64 times, Mr Speaker. Putting everyone at risk, including yourself.
Order. The Premier has the call.
Including yourself, Member for Everton. You were part of it. There you are. He said, I take that interjection. I take that interjection. I take that interjection Shame on you. Shame on you.
Comments will come through the chair.
Queenslanders at risk. I will never put the health of Queenslanders at risk, Mr. Speaker. And if I have to take tough action again, I will. I will. I absolutely
Order.
will.
Premier's time has expired.
There's some very bold statements there. Then, as you can see, the confidence level of our Premier, when you remember the days, the first when she was elected, quite humbling, that experience, and now she has got the experience and the confidence to lead that parliament, and that argument as well. But, well, when you look at when we move around, as we do, as the media, we move around the circles and we have to go to all the, events and functions and find out and get to know what's happening. The news from the other side, of course, is otherwise. So, they're looking at the debts that's been put on place and how long will it take to pay the debts that, the coming generations will have to foot that bill. So that's another argument that's been put in place. But the argument is that, right now, whatever's been put into the economy is to keep it viable, floating and sustainable. And that is very, very important. Reaching a level of excellence is always easy. Sustaining it is very hard. Same goes with any businesses or anyone's private success as well. You could reach a certain level, but sustaining and maintaining it, that level is always a big challenge. You could always hit the target or reach the peak once, but being there, keeping that afloat is a challenge. So that's a challenge that's being facing there. Well, right now, let's take a quick commercial break before we go into the news in brief. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Australian Indian Radio's daily live Facebook updates. Do welcome your comments, and thank you so much for the comments and the feedback that have been coming through. Really, really do appreciate that.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globnetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 Sandgate Road, Bundall, Queensland. Globenet Reality. Real estate is our world.
And it definitely is. So, ladies and gentlemen, do you know that around this time of the year, it began way back, is that we had to get our flu shots. So, if you haven't done so yet, still not too late, please go and get your flu shots done. As we know, as soon as the pandemic hit, people were trying to get the flu shots and they were put in waiting line for the first time. There was that big rush. The rush is over. You can get in there and get your flu shots done. But it is important that we get those flu shots done and also be mindful of the young ones, as is said in this message. As the situation involves, it is important to catch up on missed vaccinations as soon as safely possible. Vaccines are a safe, simple and effective way to protect your loved ones against deadly diseases like measles and meningitis. So don't miss the chance to ensure that your child's immune system is as strong as it can be. The world is facing one health crisis. You can help prevent another. So don't delay. Reach out to your local clinic or health provider and protect your family and protect everybody. a beautiful message, a wonderful message there, a universal message there, I should say, affecting everyone. So it is very important that, those vaccinations are done and in time, especially protecting our young ones. With their immune system as well, as was reported in there, that, even if we might be okay, children keep growing as things happen. So, we need to make sure that all the vaccine injections that they needed to get are put in place as soon as possible. Right now, let's go to the news in brief. ABC's, all this segment is brought to you by the courtesy of ABC. So ABC's North America correspondent Catherine Diss shares her coronavirus experience. So no one is immune. As we know, in India, the Bollywood the actor and his family, and there's been lots of talks on social media about that, and so no one is immune. No one can be put aside. So everyone has to be careful. So here's an experience from ABC's North America correspondent Catherine Diss, who shares her experience on coronavirus experience. She described what it is like to have coronavirus in Washington. So let's hear from Catherine Diss.
Catherine, viewers may have noticed you've been missing from our screens for a little while, and we can reveal this morning to them it was because you were quite sick with coronavirus. I hope you're doing okay, but can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, that's right, Lisa. I've spent the better part of the last fortnight isolating in my basement after coming down fairly heavily with symptoms of coronavirus. It was, I suppose, a fairly frightening experience. I woke up with a fairly tight sort of feeling in my throat a couple of hours after going to bed one night. That was about 5 days after returning from Tulsa in Oklahoma, where we covered the Donald Trump's comeback rally. It was a fairly frightening feeling. The sore throat came on fairly quickly. I had an incredibly bad headache, a real ache behind my eyeballs, and I also was completely exhausted. And I suppose for me, the critical point where I sort of jolted up and thought twice about how I was feeling was when I got up the next morning. I was very dizzy. I was unable to stand for long, and simple tasks just seemed incredibly difficult. And we've heard a lot of people who have contracted coronavirus talk about a kind of mental fog.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, Catherine Diss speaking first-hand experience of what it is like to be in Washington and been diagnosed with coronavirus. So now, could social housing help us out of the COVID-19 recession? So, there's a lot of talk going on now. People are bracing, and there is uncertainty. There is definitely uncertainty out there. People don't know what's going to happen, especially in the economic scene. Of course, everyone's concerned about the health. The departments are doing what they can. The vaccine is being tried out in many countries. The race is on to who is the first one to come up with that vaccine. But what's going to happen to the world economy? And of course, the governments are injecting money into the economies, but for how long? When will it come back to its self-sustaining level? So that is a big question. But could social housing help us out of the COVID-19 recession? The federal government is being urged to build more social housing. There is a desperate need for it, but it could also support the construction industry and could even help the economy with this recession.
I'm the last person you'd expect to see in social housing. I really suffered for a long time, and it's been a really long, hard road to get back.
54-year-old Mike Smith was once a high flyer who travelled the world.
I owned a property on an island in the Whitsundays. I owned a house on 7 acres in central Victoria, an apartment in Melbourne, 2 sports cars and a share portfolio, and was earning between $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a week.
He had a successful career, once an advisor to a federal minister. But debts racked up from drug and alcohol addiction. It cost him his job, and soon he had nothing left.
There I was with the employment minister in the Howard government launching the job network. And then years later, there I was lining up in the queue at Centrelink.
So there were, could social housing be the answer? As we know, social housing has many times been criticized in many countries as a place not to be in, because many places they are small, little, cramped up colonies and people don't quite like that. But if it's done well, it could be the answer. If there is a need for it within any community, as we know, in certain countries, that the social housing which has been provided are very, very poorly designed and they're cramped, and what they are what is known as the low-cost housing and many other names that they've been known with in many different countries. It's not a desirable place to be with for many people, but right here in Australia, it could be the answer as we have seen in that report. But some experts argue that it's time for Australia to change its suppression strategy. Although Victoria is still battling to contain the virus, most of the states and territories have eliminated local transmission. That there is no local transmission. It is coming from somewhere else. And many experts argue that Australia should change its suppression strategy. Do you agree?
In April, Australia decided not to follow New Zealand in aiming to eliminate the virus.
It's still accurate, isn't it, that Australia's goal is flattening the curve, not total elimination?
That's exactly right. It's called the suppression strategy.
Although infections are growing in Victoria, dwarfing the first outbreak, around the country it's a different picture. Tasmania hasn't recorded a new case for 60 days. South Australia's gone more than 2 weeks without a new case. Elsewhere, most new cases are from returning travellers. Queensland and WA have both gone more than a month without any local transmission. Until July, New South Wales had enjoyed more than 2 weeks without recording any locally transmitted cases. Its current outbreak has been traced back to a Victorian. Given the success of most states and territories in stamping out the virus, there are now growing calls for Australia to change its strategy and pursue elimination.
That would mean, obviously, no gatherings, no protests, no trade, no returnees from overseas, no family reunions.
Well, we're joined now by Professor Tony Blakely. He's an epidemiologist.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Now the next question, the next big question which we have been talking about is the economic recovery and how are businesses going to sustain themselves if there is a second lockdown. What's going to happen then? So businesses in Victoria were only just starting to recover when the second lockdown was announced last week. Now, many businesses are worried and many business owners might not survive as they reckon the businesses will go down. But experts say it's not the lockdown, but the failure to control the virus that could be or should be blamed. Whoever you put the blame on, you can play the blaming game, but what is going to happen to the livelihood of those small businesses?
So we were open and trading 10 months before the first lockdown. So this has definitely been a bit of a speed bump for our first year of trade.
26-year-old Holly Hudson's small business in Keilor East, Victoria, is once again closed after the latest outbreak of COVID-19.
During the first one, we were very optimistic, and I feel like this one is really going to hurt. And if it does continue to go on, then, you know, there's only so many times that we can get back up from this.
Holly got a 50% rent reduction during the first shutdown, but he's worried she won't be able to strike a new deal.
So the agreement that we came to with our landlord was for the first 10-week closure. So we have not revisited that yet. So that will have to be renegotiated. So that's another question mark for us. Owning your own business, you just feel that all your hard work and everything that you've put into it, you might lose it. And that's the scariest.
And that is a sign of times to come. So because there will be many people, many businesses who will be forced to do that. As we know, the rent moratorium came in place. Many landlords have been considerate, and they have reduced the commercial rents to the tenants so that the tenants could keep the doors open with the JobKeeper in place, which is sort of, fueling the economy for a while. But what is going to happen in the long term? The people have many commercial leases which they are defaulting on because there is just no way they can sustain that level of commitment which was pre-COVID. And everything was structured at the level of the income coming into at the level of the turnover that those businesses had pre-COVID-19. But with COVID-19 in place, with the turn down in place, there are many things which the businesses are legally binded to meet those expenses. And if the income is not there, how do they balance the books? It is simple economics. So it is going to be hard. Times are going to be hard as we move forward. But, there has to be some very strong economic policies and some strong changes to boost the economies as they move forward. But as has been said before, that people will need to adapt to a different style of lifestyle. It is not going to be the same ever. When people say, once we get back to normality, we will get back to a normal situation, we will get past the COVID-19, but it will never be the same as it was before all this started. That is the fact of life. Well, right now, let's take a look at Glendale Aged Care, the cluster. Growing COVID clusters in aged care homes in Melbourne are causing great concern. And as we discussed the aged care in one of the segments in here, it got a lot of commentary, and that still remains. We have still got to follow up on that aspect and on that note. So hundreds and thousands of masks have been sent to facilities in the city. And let's take a look at one of these houses and see what it's like to be inside.
My name's Gabrielle and this is Braxton, and I'm the granddaughter of Alf Jordan, and this is his great-grandson.
The Caldwell family is missing their granddad Alf.
We knew he was unwell, but we certainly didn't expect it to be COVID, and we didn't expect COVID to take him so soon.
They weren't allowed to be by his side when he died last Friday, the first casualty of the coronavirus outbreak inside the Glendale Aged Care Home in southwest Melbourne.
The hardest part of this is that we weren't able to comfort him in his last moments, and also we weren't able to say goodbye. That's what hurts.
The aged care home is now on high alert, with the cluster growing to 15 today. 10 staff and 5 residents have now tested positive.
This is my room from my front door.
Fellow Glendale resident 46-year-old Nigel Hart says the news of Alf's passing has shaken the facility. Nigel has underlying conditions that require him to be in...
The harsh reality of life, in those golden years when people have spent all their life doing hard work, bringing up the family, bringing up, working in the businesses, working on factories, working on, whatever they have done for all their life. When it comes to their golden years, soon they have a better life. That's what I believe. They should be better looked after. As we know, there have been great concerns about many aged care homes where, the elderly have been ill-treated as well. So, these are the golden years, and they would rather spend that, together with their grandchildren and then have a happy time. But unfortunately, in today's day and age, people can't do that because of the health conditions, and of course the facilities in the houses are not such where they can be well looked after. So they have to be moved into these so-called homes. And I have visited many. I have spoken at many as well. Some of them are better than the others. Of course, they always will be the case. But again, when you look at the people in there, some of them are happy. They've got a grin on their face, but you can see in the background that they are missing the loved ones. They don't like being locked up in like that. But that's the reality of life. They need care. they need to be looked after, so they are put in these homes, in the aged care homes, and they are not cheap. These things are, some people have worked all their life, they have their home, and then they have to sell their home to move into the these aged care homes, where often they are not treated well, and they just left there, and the healthcare workers, I'm not saying all of them, some of them are they get so sick and tired of looking after all these elderly people. They are not as considerate as they can be. So these are some very harsh questions. But the fact of the life is that these people have traveled through the life. They've done their bit. This is now their time to sit down, relax, and be relaxed and content in these golden years. But often that's not what happens. They are all in misery, and sometimes they're ill-treated. They're not looked after. And they all have that feeling in their heart of being together with their loved ones. But as the health restrictions are in place, of course, and also the conditions when they can't be left at home alone, the couples or their kids are working and they have their own lives to lead as well. No one is at home to look after them, so the best place for them to go is to these aged care homes, where they spend the last years of their life. This is an area which really needs to look after that. I'd like to welcome anyone who likes to discuss this topic with me onto the show, as there's so much that we can talk about in this area. What is happening within specific communities? As we know, there are cultural needs of people that need to be looked after as well. But in these years when they have spent their whole life looking after the family in whichever way they could, and they've contributed to the community, they've contributed to the society. Now is the time for the golden age, years when they need to sit down and relax. But often many are forced to keep working till the last time to make ends meet, because there's no one else here to help and support. The onus is on them. The burden lies on their shoulders, because if they don't do it, no one else is going to do it for them. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'd like to leave you with the upcoming events. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's live updates. It's been wonderful having your company. Looking forward to your comments and feedbacks as well. Once again, thank you so much for being with me. Thank you so much. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.